So welcome back to the show. This is Flynn, and I'm sitting here with Freddy Alexander, who is a home builder and who's going to talk to us about the latest alternative ways of house building in the U.S. and in the world. Freddy, thanks so much for joining us. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for the invitation, Flynn. This is I think it's a cool topic. It's a cool conversation. There's so much information available to all of us about, the housing market and house building and energy use. And, it can be overwhelming. But it's what interests me. So I deep dive into it, and I've worked in it professionally. And where should we start? Like, it's a vast, vast subject. So, I don't know. Is there anything like you are not in the same lane that I am with all of this, but you kind of get it. You've owned property, you understand real estate. I think you've used a lot of different kinds of spaces. You've developed spaces for different purposes. And so, like as a person who uses, I feel like I'm a person who like creates spaces to be used by others. I typically I'll build something or I'll do something or develop something. And then when it's done and it's ready for use, I go away and other people come and use it. And like so from my side of this realm, like you're on the side of, you're coming into the spaces to use them. And so what do you want to know about?
Well, great. So let's just start with getting your background and your interest in this subject to begin with.
Oh, my background. Okay, so my technical background is consumer electronics, so I used to repair, car stereos, tape decks, televisions, VCRs, and those kind of, became more cost effective. For real, to just replace those things with new ones rather than repair them, and a lot of that has to do with the increasing cost of spaces to facilitate repair shops, and also as wages and the amounts of money that people made in their jobs began to lag behind the cost of housing, just gradually over time. This has been a progression. It's not something that sort of suddenly happened. And so it just was too costly and too time consuming to repair something versus replacing with new. So I was like, okay, what do I do? So I moved across to automotive because cars at the time were too expensive to throw away, but very electronic. And so you needed electrical specialists in order to, sort of deal with the progressing technology in the automotive field. And so that worked out great for a while. And then, the cars kind of became, this probably not a lot of like buy it for life choices in new vehicles on the market. And that's just my opinion. We'll never know. You don't know what's good and what isn't good until they've been tens of thousands of them driving around for 10 years. So who knows? We'll see how it goes. But I don't have confidence in that. And so then I moved into building because, it's like, okay, I can see the trajectory. Cars are going to become disposable and replaceable with new units. So if I stay in this field, like I was tired and I didn't want to do it and I wanted something else. So I went to building. And now we're kind of at a point where even housing is sort of like has a very short life expectancy. Like even something that's being built new today is probably not going to last in the way that something that was built in, the 1950s or 40s or 30s or, there's survivorship bias is really a thing. And yeah, like the bad ones, they didn't last. But there's a difference in the kinds of materials that are even realistically available for building. And that has to do with, a house built 100 years ago would have been built with trees that were very old. They were processed differently. They were harvested at a different time of year. And all this has to do with what is the weight of the logs, what is required to cut them up into the standardized building forms, and those boards they lasted longer, they were stronger, they were heavier, they had more sap in them, they resisted everything that happens to wood better than like a new wood product. And a lot of our new wood products are little pieces of wood that sort of, smashed together under tremendous pressure with glues that are, the glues are toxic. If they burn, that's very, very bad. The products are, they're getting better with water resistance, but there's nothing like a solid piece of wood. Nothing is going to resist moisture like a solid piece of wood. And we just don't have that resource available in the same way now that we did 100 years ago. So, we can pine for the old days, but they're in the past. And now we're here. So what are we going to do? So that's it. Consumer electronics to automotive to housing, from the building side. And that's it. So those are the things that fascinate me, and I'm trying to pull all of those together. And I have some ideas about, what might be a better way to do it. And 3D printing houses is very popular right now, and I like them personally. Like, I think it's a cool idea. I really like it, but it's very technology heavy, and it's like, well, what could go wrong? There's so many ways when you're sort of like, you're laying concrete, but there's software involved. I mean, there's a lot of layers, and it's almost like a format issue. Like which format will win. So there's 3D printing machines that can print houses. Well, obviously that's an enormous piece of equipment. It's bigger than a house, and it has to be, at least in one dimension. Like it has to, if it's printing the house, it has to be able to be around the entire shape of the house. So it's a big piece of equipment. It has to be moved on site. There's not very many of them. There's not very many people who make them. It's emerging technology. And, you can't print steel reinforcements. And then steel and concrete together is a whole another topic that I have a lot to say about, but it's not the way into the future if we're concerned with longevity beyond 2 lifetimes. Why? Because it's inevitable that the concrete will absorb acidity from the atmosphere, from just the air around us. That's intensified a little bit with rain. Rain helps it to soak in. It's taking in carbon. It's taking in salts if you're a marine environment, which is really kind of scary. And any groundwater or flood waters or ocean waters that it's exposed to, it once it gets into where the steel rebar is, that's the strength of that's all the tension strength. You have compression strength with concrete, but there's really not any pulling strength, and that comes from the rebar. Well, the rebar will start to rust with the acidity that is going to reach it eventually over time. And as it rusts, it will begin to puff up and expand in dimension, and that pushes on the concrete and cracks it. And as soon as there are cracks, now there's an open, now water and environmental contamination can get directly to it, and the process accelerates. And this is what happened with Surfside condominiums in Florida. It was all over the news. People died in the night. This thing is built on the beach and collapsed. And I think there were some design issues with it. There were problems beyond, just the progression of damage possibly from rebar. It's in a marine environment, and it was there for a long, long time and didn't fall down. So it was capable of supporting its weight, but something happened to change that over time. And people have looked at this, and that's maybe not the best example of rebar and concrete. But I have lots of pictures, from marine bulkheads and things like that are built with reinforced concrete. And in a marine environment, you can see the acceleration of it. There's lots of great examples where the steel is rusting, it's puffing up, and it just blows open the concrete. So, the lifespan of a concrete and steel reinforced structure is about 100 years by today's standards. So, you got to think about that. I know where there's some sweet, downtown condominiums that were built in 1963, so that place has maybe, I don't know, 50 years left. Whatever, it's going to need more maintenance. whatever happens to it. I mean, there's ways to save anything if there's no budget and no timeline. You know? And so that leads back into like, well, who can afford that? Well, there's some can, but when we look at people who work, you know, the people who build things, the people who fix things, the people who, you know, make the music that we listen to and create the art that we hang on our walls. Like everybody has to be someplace. And so I don't think that concrete reinforced steel is a great, I mean, you can build really tall. So like the maximum density can be achieved with that. Okay, I'm not going to hand wave that away. That's so important. Density is super important. It's not what I would want for myself though. And a lot of people feel that way. You know, it's like, I just want to, you know, like enough space to grow some lettuce and some tomatoes, you know, like in the yard, just a little bit of space and walk to someplace nice. So I don't know, in the future, I think electric cars are really going to be a thing that's good that we need, but you know, to make it make sense, they need to be powered by our houses. Well, right now we don't really have enough electricity to do that. So I think, you know, the amount of energy that it takes to commute to a job in an electric car that you plug into your house overnight, the amount of energy or power, in this case, electricity that we're talking about, to use that car for a month every day, to charge it every night, is about the same amount of energy use as your heating and air conditioning. And not when it's 75 degrees outside. You know, like most places get pretty cold in the winter. Some places it's really hot in the summer. You know, we're in Austin, and so Austin is over 100 degrees for a significant period of time in the summer. And so it's a lot of electricity to run air conditioners. So, you know, most houses that's just like a single family house or duplex or triplex, you know, these kinds of places, the wires just aren't that big. You know, we can't double their use of electricity to power the cars. So where is that energy going to come from? Well, we could, you know, rebuild the grid. Okay, well, everybody who works in the energy sector and everybody who works in the automotive sector and the electric car parts and everybody who works with, you know, energy use and economics, it's pretty obvious that, you know, like, where's it going to come from? I mean, data centers, this is already a thing. You know, we have hundreds of data centers that are proposed for development and build out. And at present, you know, it's like the wires in the grid are not big enough to supply them all with electricity. You know, so you see things like, who is it? It's Elon did one in Tennessee, and they just put a bunch of gas powered electric generators, like huge generators, and they run all the time, and they just burn natural gas to produce the electricity for the data center on site. And I don't think they would do that if they could just hook it up to the wires and there would be enough power to run it. So where is that going to come from? Well, what if we could reduce energy use in houses by like 80%, you know, to heat and cool them? I mean, it's really hard to retrofit old structures to be able to do this. It's possible to do it, but it's really expensive. And it's, you know, whoever does it doesn't really benefit from it. It would be like the next generation of people who live in that house are the ones who would really benefit, because it would already be paid for, that improvement. But when we build new, you know, this is part of what the code is doing, and a new build is way, way more efficient than a 100-year-old house. You know, it's the gains that I'm talking about. We're close to achieving that just through, you know, the International Building Code as it's written right now. And then it's kind of like the real estate market. You know, every place is a little different. Well, what climate are you in? What state are you in? So insulation and energy efficiency codes and guidelines are local. Like your city is going to have a standard that if you build a new house there, you're going to have to meet that. And they're going to come and check and see that it's done. And so we have those gains, but the issue that I see is that the structures that have accomplished this are made from materials that, you know, they have a high degree of toxicity. They're really, really bad. They really don't give you time when they're burning to get away from it. You know, you have less than like 2 minutes, you know, to escape from a burning house that has a lot of products that are derived from petroleum. When they burn, they can kill you really quickly. So it's, I think, there's probably fewer fires because the codes also look at that. Like anytime there's a fire, they're like, well, how did this fire happen? And how can we set standards and best practices for mechanical equipment so that it doesn't happen again? And we've come along, it's like having a car from 1950 versus having a modern car with side curtain airbags, and you get in a crash. Which one are you going to be better off in? Well, obviously the newer one with the better technology. But they're not going to last. They're not going to last for 100 years. They're going to be super efficient while they're still, and one of the biggest things that's going to happen is this moisture, condensation, leaks, so straight water, and molds and changes to structural integrity that are caused by moisture, just water in the environment. So, so what do we do? So I don't know. I think 3D printing is exciting. I think that if it was really, we're not there yet with it. Because think about this. If it was cheaper to 3D print houses, don't you think that the largest home builders in the United States would be 3D printing all of their houses and keeping the profit? Of course they would. So to me, it's like, well, that's the evidence in front of me that says that it's a great solution. It's very interesting. I think that it could be improved and it'll get better and better. But at present, if it was more economical, it would already be farther than what it is. So it's a technology-based solution. I'm not anti-technology-based solutions, but it's sort of like, if you have a car that is monitoring all the tire pressures, including the spare, and if the spare tire is low, then it turns a light on that tells you on your dash. I mean, there's use in that, but it's also, the car is like, it's a lot of technology for something as simple as a spare tire, And so with houses, it's like, well, maybe an older, simpler, stupider solution is like faster, cheaper, more energy efficient, and just cheaper and faster. That's kind of what we need. We need things to happen fast. It's sort of our culture. If it's not fast enough, then it's not a solution. And if it's not cheap enough, it's not a solution. And so, whatever, like there's so many pioneers. We have Passive House. We have Michael Reynolds and Earthships. We have, green roofs. There's just so, geothermal is a real thing for hot water, for using if you have hot groundwater where you are. I mean, there's so many ways. But a lot of them, and especially like one of my favorites is Passive House. Now, Passive House is very effective. It really does, what it's claimed to do, but it's sort of like pulling out all the stops like perfectly, like to a high level. So it requires a kind of attention to detail that it takes a lot of time. It has to be put together by somebody who's really, really good. And let's face it, I mean, we're not all great at our jobs. There can only be one like best person ever at any kind of job. Okay, so I guess it goes to repeatability. Like Passive House is good, but is it repeat? Like, can we write down the instructions and have it really come out and be as effective? Maybe. I'm not sure. It's expensive, and it's.
Can you define Passive House?
Passive House? Oh, Passive House is. I'm not an expert at Passive House, but in my, when I think about it, it's like, okay, this, became popular decades ago in Germany. And there's a lot of, I think of it as its genesis as being in Germany. I don't know if that's accurate, but it definitely was adopted there some time ago. And a lot of people did it, and it was proven, they sort of proved, hey, this really works. Like, you don't really need air conditioning. I mean, in Germany, it's fine without it. And it's very much easier to heat it. It takes a lot less energy. And it's sort of building, like a very tight envelope that doesn't, like air can't move in and out of it very rapidly. So like leaky windows, things like that, but the wall structure, any place there's a penetration for plumbing or electricity or an outlet or, whatever. And they'll do things like have glass that's facing the south and there's an overhang. And so when the sun is lower in the wintertime, they plant deciduous trees and the leaves fall off and the sun shines through the trees and into the glass and it warms up a concrete on the floor or a tank with water in it it's the side of the house that's just absorbing heat from the sun passively in the wintertime. And then in the summertime, as the sun comes up in the horizon, the overhang is designed to sort of let the shade cast at the bottom or just on the outside of the windows so that it doesn't shine in the glass. So you're not adding direct solar gain in the summertime when you don't want it. And at the same time, in the nighttime, it has thermal mass that's absorbing, the heat from the day so that it's taking longer to heat up the house. And then it's releasing it sort of at night. So it evens out the temperature. Passive house takes very little energy to heat and cool it. It does it, in temperate climates, they don't need mechanical equipment at all to be comfortable, unless you want it exactly, 68.5 degrees and never to vary from that. I mean, passive house is going to wander a little bit, but it's going to be comfortable. Like you're not going to die because of weather extremes, probably. If you're in a passive house and you didn't have any energy and there was a weather extremes, you're a lot better off in a passive house because it takes longer for anything to get too hot or too cold. It's the extremes will be lessened. Okay. So passive house is great, but it's complicated and it's expensive and it's more time consuming than not passive house. So it has those things against it. And so all the examples that I've actually, I haven't visited any in person. Well, actually, no, that isn't true. I actually worked on an experimental project that was passive, but that's a whole nother exploration. But passive works, but it tends to be the ones that I see examples of, they're very expensive. This is not a house that a person living in a suburb of a city commuting into downtown to go to work, like they're not going to be in a place economically, like they're not going to make the kinds of money probably that can, like they're not all going to buy passive house. They're not all going to be able to afford to build that. So it's a solution like if you don't have other problems. Or should I say challenge? I don't know. But anyway, so I think the key takeaway from passive house is the thermal mass part of it. And if we look at ancient civilizations or from before the Industrial Revolution, I mean, people built out of they just built out of stone. They maybe converted caves. They did things like and then you have the Romans and Greeks, and they're not sort of carving out the sides of caves and the sides of cliffs. They're just sort of building with a bunch of mass and directing water. And so I don't know. I think the solution maybe is like use local materials, use dirt, build with thermal mass. Like there's ways to make it faster, cheaper, and more energy efficient. And there's not, if I look on the Austin market in the greater Austin metro area and even including all in between and San Antonio and south to the coast, I mean, there's nothing on the market. Like if you want to buy a house and you go and you look at the market and you go to all these places, you're not going to find a house that's built with thermal mass. You're only going to find houses that are built and they're depending on insulation for their energy efficiency. And so that's the thing I think that's missing. It's not that we don't know how to do it. It's that, we're very people are voting for technology big right now. I mean, look at the stock market. There's like 7 technology companies that are sort of pulling everything up, with it. And it's like, technology, that's the answer. That's the solution. Well, that's true for things that can't otherwise be accomplished. But we don't, maybe need a data center and a mobile phone to unlock the front door of our house to go in. I mean, that's cool. Like you can let your friends in when you're not there yet and you're 2 minutes away. Okay, I get it. Like that's cool. That's fun and that's cool. But is it necessary? No. What could possibly go wrong? What could possibly go wrong? So So I don't know. Maybe I'm just, from the 1900s, but I think, keys work pretty well. Like I don't see any way that the technology of sending data, into the internet and then back into phones, into the house and all of that makes it any harder for someone to just put a boot into your front door and break it and open it. So does it make you physically safer in your house? Monitoring wise, yeah, the case could be made. That's totally arguable. But, if it's at that point, like the lock is to keep someone from opening the door. Well, if they can kick it open with the internet in the same way that they can kick it open without the internet, without the internet, there's just less to go wrong. That's just the way I look at it. And that's just my opinion, but I don't know. Like I hear other people saying like, oh, couldn't I just buy like a cheaper car, but have manual windows instead of electric ones? It's expensive when the electric window breaks. It kind of sucks for the second or third owner of that car when there's no warranty, So, I get it. It's like the window winders are, part of the reason that went away is they're heavier, so they weigh more, they use more steel, so there's more embodied carbon, ironically, in a manual window versus a power window. And so if it's just the standard and it's everywhere and everything has it, that's just the way we do it. And it's lighter, it makes it faster, and it's actually cheaper until it breaks. And then it's much, much more expensive because it's less durable and it doesn't last as long. So that's the calculus with housing. How much is it going to cost? How long is it going to last? How durable is it going to be? How safe is it going to be if something happens? And that could be hurricanes, tornadoes, fires. Like how do things perform in that? And, and I think just like cars, like if the worst happens, what could keep people the safest? You rarely ever going to, like a lot of people go their whole lives and they never depend on an airbag in a car to save their lives. They're very lucky, and there's so many people who the airbag is the difference. They're still here. So obviously we want to do that with housing. And I think that attention is given to that. There's a lot of people who care about that. It's part of the reason for building codes, is just straight up like it's safe enough that you don't have to worry about dying because of it, like as it should be, but it does complicate things and add expense and time. And so, so that's it. How do we shave off expense? How do we shave off time? How do we make it perform better and be safer? And I think that that's with just compressing earth into blocks that's like concrete. There's less carbon energy. It's a local material. It's faster. It should be cheaper, but that's my goal, is to just build one it's just for science. It's an experiment. Like, well, let's measure it, because this all sounds great, until you get to the bank or whoever is going to write a check for it. And they're like, well, what is the energy bill going to be? Can you show me an example? Like, I need to see it first. Well, that's fair enough. So it's like a chicken and egg. For me, it's a little bit of a catch-22. So I don't know. So that's where I'm coming from. Is like, there just needs to be an example that's measured. It's lived in. It's used, and see how it goes. And I think if it works out great, that it could be a good solution going forward to increase use of electricity for transportation. Reduction in electrical use overall would be great, but I don't know, replacing gasoline, that's good. If every car was electric and we didn't have gasoline at all, and I'm not proposing that, or I'm not an advocate of that. It's just as an example, like in the future, that's what we're talking about. Instead of using gasoline at all, we could just use our houses, but they have to be more efficient in order to accomplish that. So it's good for finance. It's good for, just I think the experience of living, and that makes it a solution. It's just like that. Anything that doesn't work economically or time wise isn't going to be a good solution on a massive scale.
Right. So, can you define and expound on the solution that you're talking about doing that is in your mind, and how you would do it?
Yeah, I'd like to talk about that actually. So I want to say, like, I know a lot about building because I've built a lot of stuff, different kinds of things, but there's nothing in this that I I haven't invented anything. Like I'm not that creative. I'm just taking, like I've built with so many different kinds of materials, and I've been able to see how they've performed over time. And so there's nothing that I've created or invented. It's just something that I see that already exists. And when I go to look at houses on the market for sale, there's no examples of it that you can buy. So it's not the way forward that's missing, it's the availability in a marketplace. That's the thing that's missing. So that's kind of what I'm sort of taking on as my focus, is not how to do it, but how to get it to people who might want this. And I think in order for people to make up their mind, do I want this or not, they need to see it. They need to walk in it. They need to smell it. They need to touch it. They need to see, like, well, here's the utility bills for a year of this house. You can see, like, when it was freezing here, it was this. When it was 110 degrees outside, it was this. It's pretty low, right? But they need to see that, and that's fair enough. So it's just basically using dirt. If you have 70% sand and 30% clay, and then you take out about 7 or 9% of that and add lime or Portland cement and compress it, the outcome of that is something that's like concrete. I mean, you can leave it underwater. It doesn't break down with moisture. It holds up like concrete. But it doesn't use there's no metal inside of it. And so if it does get saturated or it's underwater, like there's nothing inside of it that's going to break it apart. And the idea is to make walls out of this. They're like stone walls or big brick walls, and it's 12 inches thick or 18 inches thick. Well, this is a mass, like you couldn't push it over, like it's massively strong because it's so heavy, and that's, it isn't insulated, but it has a huge mass. And so it takes, 12 hours for heat to move from the outside of it to, say, the inside of it in the summertime. I'm always thinking of heat from the outside because Austin is really hot. Like, if you don't like hot weather, don't move here. Come visit in the winter and then go home. But that's it. It's like transportation is reduced. Concrete is very carbon intensive. Compressing dirt into blocks on site is not carbon intensive. It's the opposite of that.
So what would you call what you're looking to do?
Compressed earth block, or CEB. And there's actually a company in San Antonio that makes the machines that create the blocks. And the owner of this company built one of these. He just took his machines and made blocks, and he built one on his own property. And so I don't know that anyone lives in that, but it does exist as an example that could be seen right now. Like it's already there, but I don't know if he is measuring the electrical use of it. I don't know if it's occupied all the time. They have some, I guess it's taking water from the roof and storing that, and then he's sort of cleaning it and filtering it. And so that's really cool. But so even examples of this, and I know that there are a lot of projects incorporating this into them. There are earthen houses in Austin that, were built years ago, and they're, like $2.5 million houses. Like they're amazing, but they're expensive, And so I don't think that the market is missing $2.5 million houses. I think it's missing, $175,000 houses that will last potentially for generations,
So what's the hindrance in the block that you're seeing in order to build these kinds of thermal mass houses?
I think just an example that people can walk in and see, that can be shown off. Like that's its purpose for existing, is like a house that's actually used and lived in, that's energy and resource use is measured so that there's a comparison that's honest, that's real. It's like it's been measured. It's not an opinion, it's not a visceral experience. I hope that, there are ways of building structures, and you can kind of feel it. I mean, you can feel heat radiating, through windows or walls. And so I just think people need to walk inside it and see an example of it, and it be, for sale on the market. And, it's like, well, this is the price. And if that can be lower than a stick-built house, then I think it's what we should be doing. But honestly, like, how much does it cost to build this? Well, I don't know. When I pencil it all out, it just looks like it's a whole lot cheaper and easier and faster and better. It can't burn. Bugs can't eat it. It uses not very much to heat and cool it. I mean, it's bulletproof. There's so many good things about it. But I think that's what's missing. That's the barrier, is more examples at a price point. That's what's sort of missing in our marketplace for housing.
And one of the biggest things about being able to buy a house is, for most people, is to finance it. So they have to go through a lender and a mortgage company in order to do so. How does that affect your idea on how to build these types of houses?
Man, that is such an important aspect to all this. So I'm glad that you asked this question. If we look at other previously experimental structures like Earthship, okay, a lot of people know about this. They've seen it. They've maybe visited them or stayed in them. But Michael Reynolds is the person that I sort of point to. To me, he's the creator of it. Like, he started this, and they weren't legal when he started, but he did it anyway because he's a pioneer. And it was years and years and years to gain any kind of even temporary experimental legal permission to create. And I mean, an Earthship, for anybody who doesn't know, like it's sort of like passive house. It's sort of like a cave dwelling. It's sort of like using thermal mass. It has an area where you grow food inside of the house. It collects rainwater. It processes the water. All the water that you use, it reprocesses that, biologically, and then reintroduces it into the environment. In other words, they need no grid connection. They have solar panels and batteries and thermal mass, and they store water, and they work great in the desert. That's like the place that they're like built to. That's where he created them, and that's what they're built to do. And now you can get a mortgage to buy an Earthship, and I mean, there's recycled tires, and some, like that's one way they do it is they make a berm and they pack them with dirt, and it's fine. It's like you would never know that it's there. I mean, do you know what the insulation inside your house walls looks like? No, nobody cares. So now, thanks to Michael Reynolds basically dedicating his professional life to this, and probably really his whole life, to accomplish something that's this significant, that's this different, that has so much advantage that, now you can go and get a mortgage and buy one. So he did it. So I think, one of the challenges with Earthships is the psychological acceptance in a broad, through the broad width of society. People, I've worked as a volunteer in environmental sort of education and experimental structures and showing people the environment, introducing people to the environment and all of that. So what am I saying? Like, where was I going?
Well, we were talking about being able to get a mortgage for the types of houses that you're wanting to build.
Right, okay.
And you gave an example of the Earthship, but I'm not sure that that's exactly the types of houses that you're trying to build. So can you give us more about that?
Yes, I guess my ideas are very different than the Earthship, and one of the most important aspects of that is the aesthetic, reality of it. And so during my time, giving time to environmental concerns, I would say, on different levels. One of the things that I found is that, people will say to me, they're like, oh, but I don't want to live in a cave. Like, it just sounds like going back in time. Like, am I going to be less comfortable? I mean, is there internet? And the answer is like, yes, there's all technology that you would ever want, but, my ideas are just sort of, it's like when you have a dog and it needs medication, it doesn't want to take it. So you put the pill in a little piece of cake, and then the dog happily eats it, because it tastes good. It looks good. It's what he's used to. It's what he loves, like whatever. Maybe it's a piece of sausage, whatever. But so the idea is to make it look not so different than what people are used to. I think if they walk into a house and it looks the same as another new house, but one's made out of fiberglass and, this one's made out of 18-inch thick. You would probably have like window seats and things around, but it's not like such a departure design wise. It doesn't feel that different from the spaces that people are used to inhabit. And also the blocks themselves, there are local building authorities who've accepted these as sort of similar to a concrete block. I mean, it's legal to do it because the material is accepted by local building authorities generally. It's not hard to get, the earthship, the form of it is such a radical departure from a stick-built house that it would be difficult, outside of, I think, New Mexico or the Southwest areas to gain, it's not that it wouldn't be accepted. It just would be, people will look at it and they'll be like, well, that's weird. Quite honestly, I don't think it's weird. I think it's amazing, but a lot of people think it's weird. Okay, well, if I'm going to build something not for me, then, I could be arrogant and be like, oh, I'll just do what I want. And you'll live in it and you'll like it. Well, nobody's going to pay for that if they don't like it, So it would be, whatever. How many houses do I want? Well, I can't afford endless houses. I mean, that's not going to, so it's an absurdity, but so make it do all the things that we need it to do, but we don't necessarily have to change the form factor all that much. So different form factor. That's what I'm saying. And easier to reproduce. I mean, we probably shouldn't have grass. We should have more gardens. Well, if we got rid of grass, there's a whole sector dedicated to, maintaining yards and grounds and rose gardens and hedges and tree trimming and, and mowing grass and, putting fertilizers on the grass. Well, if we want to get rid of all that, what are the landscapers going to do? Well, let's just teach them how to keep working with dirt, but instead of maintaining the yards, they're just building the houses.
So walk us through what it would look like specifically for a house that you would want to design and build. So I'm hearing that there are some examples of the conceptuals of how to make it more efficient, how to make it more environmentally responsible, but I'm not sure I understand exactly how you would build this house.
How would it be built? Okay, if you are a person who has some exposure to building, I mean, anyone can go look at a YouTube video, but to look it up, concrete blocks. Everybody knows, it has the two holes in it. It's sort of like a hollow, it's 5 inches by 10 inches or something, I'm not really sure. But, concrete block. Very ubiquitous, is very popular in Florida. A lot of ground floors of houses are built out of this in Florida because it's, it's concrete. So if water goes in there, then the water goes away and it's just concrete. So you clean it out and it's hard to blow it down. It's very sturdy, but it's not energy efficient. That's the thing. The concrete walls you have several inches of concrete with just sort of air, and you could build 2 layers of it and insulate in between, but then that's like framing 2 houses instead of 1. So we can just say, that doubles the cost. Concrete blocks are a concrete product, so they're high carbon content, they're very heavy, and they have to be transported to a building site. So where do they come from? I mean, it could be another country, So there's a lot of energy used in just getting them, making them and getting them from where they're made to where they're going to be concreted together. And so it's better to just use material that's already local. But in order to answer your question, what does it look like? Well, it kind of looks like concrete, like a concrete block house, but just the walls are a lot thicker and they're solid. There's made out of dirt, made out of sand, clay, and lime. Or Portland cement. The lime or the Portland cement is what sets concrete. Concrete is, it's sand, it's aggregate, which means rocks. It has rocks in it. And depending on, is it a parking garage? Is it a sidewalk? Is it a terrazzo floor? I mean, the rocks are different sizes. They can be kind of big or small gravelly, but usually it'll be a mix of some sort and sand, and you add the Portland cement. And the Portland cement is what makes it, makes concrete hard. You just leave it out in the rain. It's permanent. It's like a rock that you just sort of form in place, and then it sets up and cures and sort of dries out after a while. But concrete isn't really a drying as much as it is a setting, and it's the Portland cement that does that. Well, lime will do a similar thing. So either of those materials. So you're basically, you're using like it's like building with local dirt, and you only need 7% of the concrete, because that's what you mix in to make the blocks. And they're just blocks. They're maybe 6 inches high and 12 inches wide and 12 inches thick. I mean, you can they can be any size. Like, there's people who will make a machine, they'll make any kind of block you want. It can have a design, it can have an impression, it could be special shapes, whatever. But it's basically, think concrete block house, maybe with a metal roof, because we're in Central Texas. So fire is a thing, hail is a thing, the sun is a thing, and corrosion isn't. So metal roofs are the best, longest lasting kind of roof that we can have here.
Awesome. So the use of dirt and local sand and rocks and this porcelain cement are the materials that you would use to build these walls. How would you make those walls? Are you excavating this dirt around the property and putting it in a polyurethane or not polyurethane, but a bag of some sort, like an earth bag house?
There's no bags. I guess, do we dig it out of the ground? These are very site-specific questions. So the kind of building sites that we have around Austin are, in the West, you have sloping, gradual to very steep. There's not very much topsoil. There are limestone shelves underneath. So you might dig down and set it on that. And the east side is sort of like black clay, like farmland kind of dirt out there, and it's expansive, and you'd want to dig some up. But the blocks the company in San Antonio that builds the machines that make them. Okay, you could get a custom machine that would do whatever kind of block you would want. But you bring the machine to site, and you get your mix, like you need 70% sand, 30% clay, take out, 7 or 9% of that and add your Portland cement and lime. Okay, so you mix that all up, and then you put it in a big hopper in the machine, and the machine, fills a space, compresses it. It uses a very small, like a diesel engine. And I mean, we're talking, you could probably build a whole house. You could make enough blocks to build a whole house on like 5 gallons of diesel fuel. Wow. So not a lot of energy to create the product, versus if you think about, the Portland cement does have to be made where they have an industrial furnace. I mean, it's very energy intense. So, that's what we would sort of do to have concrete, but it all has to be moved. The concrete has to be brought from a plant to the site or created there. It's just easier to make the blocks, and it's cheaper and faster. But it's just pressing them out, and then they're mortared together like concrete blocks or cinder blocks.
Okay, so that gives us an idea of what it's made of. We talked about Austin and the terrain of Austin. What about the rest of the country and the world? How do you see getting the types of materials that are necessary to build these blocks? The percentage of sand, the percentage of clay, the percentage of rock, and how do you see that working?
I don't know. That's the most honest answer I can get. I live in Central Texas, and so inhabiting this environment, I get how to build here. I know it works here. Now, I have lived in other parts of the country just to see, how are they building? On the West Coast, how are they dealing with seismic? The climate is very temperate. What does that look like? And then, in Florida, there's hurricanes, and everything floods, it's flooded. So how do they build there? How do we deal with that? So how does this work in other climates? I mean, I think it's good for all climates, but I don't really know, like I'm just sort of well, let's build one in Texas and see what happens for a year, and then I would say, well, if that works out and there's some way of funding it, like, well, let's just build one in Canada or Minnesota or someplace, really like radically the other end of the spectrum and just see what happens. I think it'll be good, but that's my whole thing is like, show me. Okay, well, I'm the guy who shows anyone this, I guess, because there's none for sale. So where are they? I don't know. I guess we just need to make one and try it out. How does it work in other places? I don't know. There's a lot of examples, of like this working in northern African places and South America and Africa. I mean, this is the normal way to build a house. This is just what they do. It's not widely accepted in the United States. And I think it's one of those things, there's no reason not to do it, but we just haven't. I mean, stick building has been really cheap historically. Like there's a reason why new houses are built that way. The oriented strand board materials made out of, wood pieces and glues, like that's very efficient use of material. And that's just reflecting the dwindling of forests. So I don't know. Why are we not doing it? I don't know. I think it's just because nobody's doing it.
So nobody's doing it yet. And to be the first one, what would you need and how would you see that to go forward to maybe start a new way of building in the U.S.?
I think I would be comfortable doing a project like this with a budget of, let's say, I'm going to overstand the mark because, ultimately, let's say if this idea was, a 2-bedroom or a 3-bedroom house and it was going to cost $300,000, well, that's too high of a price point. I mean, we're sort of on the way down, right now it's 2026 and in Central Texas, real estate prices are declining. Where the merry-go-round goes, I don't know. It's not on a pole. It's just real life. Who knows? But my goal at this time, today, is like it needs to be less than 300. But for 300, I think it could be produced, and then it would require someone willing to live in it and just pretend like use it normally. Take showers, do your laundry, run the air conditioner, run the heater. Don't skip days. Unless it just doesn't need it. You can open a window, whatever. But to find out, to measure it. I think if I lived in it and I was using it, I tend to use less energy than like the median or the average. And I would be biased. Like I have a goal. My goal is to show that, it barely uses any electricity. It barely uses water. Well, I mean, it'd be very easy to me to live in a house and sandbag that. It's like, I'll just go swim in the river instead of taking a shower. I'll save water that way. Okay, well, that's kind of cheating. So it would, so I'm saying, look, realistically, to make sure that nothing interrupted it, $300,000 in a year of someone's life to live in it. If it's a 3-bedroom house, it should be at least 3 people that live in it and use it who don't have my biases. So that it's an accurate reflection of like, well, how much water and electricity can we not use with this? I don't know. So that's it. 300,000 in a year of some time.
And how long would it take to build?
That's another good question. I think that it should take less than 6 months, but I always take longer than anyone else. And I'm never the least expensive option. So that's a challenge for me as a builder is like, could I do it in 4 months? How low can I get the cost down? Those are challenges for me. And I don't know, that's part of the exercise is like, I don't know how to answer that honestly, because there's not an example yet. And so let's all find out together. I don't know. Like I'm down to try, but I think, if it takes longer than 6 months, it's not a good solution, so I don't know, I mean, it's like anything. It's something that's not in the market. We're trying to get it to market. That's a kind of speculation, and there's always risk in speculation. And it's like, is it a good bet or is it a bad bet? It's like, how much upside is there? How much downside is there? Well, there's some downside in this idea. Sure. I mean, it's building a house, at the base of it. But I see that there's more upside, especially for the future, than, right now. So I think there's more reason to do it than there is reason to not do it, because there's always some risk in doing something new.
That's true. What are some of the downsides other than what you've talked about, or are those the only downsides that you see in building a house like this? And how do you see the Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac getting on board with a house like this?
I think that from the viewpoint of financing for a buyer, that sort of sounds like it's all. If a house like this is built and someone lives in it for a year, that means that it has been accepted by the local building authority. It's been inspected by the local building authority, and they're satisfied in its safety, in its reliability, in its conformity to building codes, that they're issuing something called a certificate of occupancy. And so I don't think that at that point it should be what it is in its differences from like the stick-built house next door or wherever would be invisible in terms of a mortgage and finance and banking. It's just a house that's for sale. What is the price? Does it appraise at that? Okay, we'll loan on that. What's the situation of the borrower? They can pay it. Great. They're good. Great. Debt to income ratio, whatever the lender is looking at is like, okay, you're good to go, so no problem. So I don't think that would change anything, and I think that's something that's good about it, is that it doesn't change all that, because all that stuff is really complicated, and not everybody understands that. And I mean, that's why we have realtors, and yeah, we could, argue about all that and fees and realtors and whatever. But look, go buy a house yourself, and don't use a realtor and don't use an attorney, and it might go okay. That could go okay, but there's just a lot that could go wrong. But in any case, whatever the side of that, like whatever anyone thinks about any of that, that's not going to be different. That's not part of, what I'm working on. If you think there's an issue with financing and banks and mortgages and lending and all of that, then you go change it. But that's outside my lane.
Fair enough. It would be something that the average person would want to know before looking at buying something like this. But what I'm hearing is we haven't crossed that bridge yet.
Well, I think that that's not a bridge that needs to be crossed. I guess that's what I'm saying in summation, is that, if I build this thing and I could measure it and do all my science and then present it to the market, I mean, that's ultimately the goal, is put it on the market for sale. And part of what makes the model work is if the appraiser and the bank and the title company are going to look at this property and agree that it is conforming, it is legal, and it is of good quality, and it's worth lending on. And that's not going to be different than any other pre-existing or new build house that anyone would buy. I mean, that's part of the goal. It's just that we're not changing any of that part of the deal. It's just the same as it would be for anyone or any house.
Okay, well, that makes a huge difference in favor of building a house like you're wanting to do. What are you looking for as far as trying to get started in building something like this?
I need yard guys. No, I mean, I'm only kind of halfway joking. I think, in my mind, I have like this best case scenario where it's like maximum efficiency and maximum, good for the widest span of the economy and of our culture in our country. So I would love to take like landscapers or yard guys and teach them how to build out of masonry that's created on site, but they need to be paid. And so I think that I would like to, have a budget of $300,000. And I mean, I don't know where that's going to come from, but I kind of feel like, the thing that is so, it's like a dangling cake, it's like a passive house. Oh, it's so beautiful. It says a mountain stream. Look at that, and it's just like, it's at the high end of the market, in its price point. And so how do we get that down? Like I think I want people to invest in it. Like I want it to be a shared project. I want it to be like a crowdsource funded, because that's a vote, because, I'm all for it. I'm like, green lights all the way. Let's find a way to do it. But, if I'm the only one, then it's just something I want, and I should just go do it for myself and be done with it and not impose, on anyone else. But if there's enough other people, it's kind of, the more I think about crowdsource funding, this is why I think it makes sense, because it's like, if enough people vote to put together $300,000 to experiment with a possible solution to housing that would use less energy, last many times longer, require less maintenance, cost less to operate over time. I mean, it would, if other people are willing to help fund it, then that means they believe in it too. And it's reflecting back to me a wide acceptance. It's like a vote, I'm not trying to be like the king of house building. I'm just saying, hey, I have an idea. Who all wants this? If there's enough of you, we'll make it.
Fair enough. That's a rather unique way of looking at building a house, but I can see your point. Yeah, so crowd surfing to fund the first example of this new house type that you want to build. Is there anywhere that people can go to see, or a website, or any way to have them contact you, or any way to find out more about this and what you're doing?
Oh, there is nothing. I have a phone, I have an email address. I have some friends. There's not. This is for me the culmination of decades of my life's work, and at the same time, the sort of like, well, what do I do with all that? This is kind of a more recent idea. And so, I would love to, does need to be a website. There does need to be a place where people could contact, get involved, find out more information, see pictures, see videos. That's going to have to be in the works, I guess that's a good step towards finding out if people want to vote for this. It's almost like running a campaign. So yeah, there's no campaign right now, but that's a good idea. I think that's a great, next step. So I don't know if anyone is out there listening to this, like if anyone ever, sort of hears this and it interests you, or you want to know more, or maybe you think it's a good idea, or maybe you're already doing it, that's great. I hope people will copy me if it works, but try to find us, and I'll try to get things out, from my end. But no, there isn't, there are pre-existing examples of it. So like I could show the material, I could show a house built out, and none of it's mine, and I didn't have anything to do with any of it. There's other people who have made a beginning, a foundation that could supply me as a builder with a stream of tools and materials to do this. There's sort of like a professional mass scale sort of supply chain, if you will, that's all local. But they're not a secret. I'm not trying to, keep them in my pocket. They're their own people. They're their own entities, and they're doing what they do, and they're really good at it. And, if anyone would come to me and be like, I want to find the guy, who makes the machines, I'd be like, okay, well, let's call him. I haven't met him, but let's just call him and go over there and meet him and see the machines, and you can buy one, or what. Like I'll show you, if there's someone else out there and you want to do this, you don't have to do it with me, go and do it. But if you want to know where to get this stuff, I'll tell anyone, because I think it should be copied. It's not important that I make money on it. I just believe in it. It needs to happen. And I can't do it by myself. So I'm looking for votes, and there's no website. I don't know. Call Mike Flynn. I don't know. He's shaking his head. It's like, so I don't know. I'm sorry, Mike. There's no website. Ask me again later.
No problem. That's something that you'll be building. But you're at the start of this, which is, while we're talking about this right now, because this is something that you believe in passionately. You're spending a lot of your time researching, and you have a ton of experience in building. So we're at the beginning of this adventure. So we'll be looking at getting a website and contact information and all of that kinds of stuff coming soon. In the meantime, we don't have that yet, but we will soon. And we'll have you back so that you can talk about that and more of your progression.
Well, that sounds good, Mike. I just wanted to say thanks for inviting me to have this conversation. I think it's been a great conversation, and I don't know, like you're just like one more person that cares. So you're like a vote, like you're a big vote right now, because today you're the only other person who's brought it up, So thank you for that, and thanks for just recording these words and having the conversation. I appreciate your time. And I appreciate that you care about this, something that I care so much about. So thanks.
Absolutely. Thanks for talking with us. I think it's an amazing idea. I think that if it works, it could change the way we build. I know that there are people out there trying to find more sustainable building, more responsible ways of resourcing materials, lots of different things that people are trying to do. So yours is one, and sounds like it's really pretty amazing. So we'll see what happens going forward. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll look forward to talking to you soon.